Okay.
Yeah. Hi, I'm back today to show you a simpler way of doing rivets other than the one we did the other day that everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I think once you've done a rivet, this sample rivet, I think it would be great for you to go back and view all the things that I did wrong and how I fixed them. But today what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be passing out a square and a circle, and I want you guys to rivet these. And you can put them wherever you want. It'll be fun to see what all of us in the class do. I kind of like drawing outside the line, so I might put mine off center somewhere, but it's up to you on that. But I do want to just share one thing with you, is that if you're looking for the center of a square, a lot of people don't realize this, but you can just draw from corner to corner and you can find center, which will make it easier if you want this exactly in the center. But I've never liked, I like things that are offset a little bit. I don't know if you can see that with that scribe. I think I'm going to do mine just off like it's the blue moon that just rose up the other night. And so these are the two pieces I'm going to rivet together. And then the next thing that you need to do is you need to choose your rivet material. And what we have here is some copper wire that I drew down to be the same size as the drill bit that we're going to be using today. And so one of the things that you'll want to learn to do is to use the calipers to figure out if you've got the right size drill bit for the right size wire. If you panic about millimeters or inches, don't, because you don't even have to read this to figure it out. You just put the rivet material in between, and then you drop your drill bit down, and if it fits in there nice and tight, then we've got the right material. But if I look here, I'll turn it around for the camera, you can see that it's a little under a 1/16 of an inch. So we're doing a 1/16 of an inch. I'm going to show you how to do a solid rivet, and then we'll do a tube rivet later. So these calipers are really nice to have. Yes, you can get the digital ones that do the thousandths and all of that, but I really find in the beginning that these inexpensive calipers work really well. So I'm going to set that aside. And then now I've got my drill bit. What I need to do is I need to choose where I'm going to center punch, because remember, just using the drill bit, it's going to wander and land where you don't want it. So I'm going to put it right here, and I'm just going to tap on it, and I got a little dimple, and I actually almost got a little dimple through here because that metal is so thin. Okay, so if I drilled through these two together, they might line up, but I really like to drill my material separately so that I get it exactly where I want it. And then if you're not drilling straight through, the bottom one is going to be a smaller hole than the top one because you might be off a little bit. So I've got these. I'm ready to drill holes in them. You guys remember doing the drilling on the sawing project. So I think maybe we should stop now. I'll drill these, and then I'll come back to show you how to measure the length of the rivet and how to set it. So I've got my holes drilled here, and I do want to remind you that this is our automatic center, or our center punch, and it's not an automatic one like I have. When you go to do that, make sure that you use a hammer that you don't care about the face on it. So those ones that are in your toolkit, don't use the metal one. You could use the rawhide for it. Okay, so I've got my two holes here. Now what I want to do is I want to take my rivet material and I want to slide it through, and if it goes through both of them, and it's always nice if they don't fall off. That means you've got a nice tight fit. What I need to do now is I need to figure out the length of my rivet. And so what I like to do is I like to take and measure the thickness of the metal and then add a 1/16 of an inch on each side. So I'm looking that this is like a 32nd. And so I'm gonna just call it a 1/16. And then so I need to do something that's more like an 1/8 inch to rivet this. So what I need to do here is I need to put a nice flat end on this. So I'm going to take my flat file and I'm going to hold it here so I can file it. So remember, when you use the diagonal cutters, that it crimps it, and we want a nice flat end on here. Okay, I've got a nice flat end on here. Now what I have here is a really cool tool that is for cutting wire and tubing. And what it does is it allows me to come through with my jeweler's saw and notch it right where I want it. So I'm going to loosen this up, and then I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to come in, and you can't see it from this side, but what I'm doing is I'm measuring, I guess we could do it this way, about the thickness of what we want. What you don't want is a really long rivet because it'll fold over, it won't compress. But I kind of like my rivet standing really proud so that there's a texture to it. And so you do have a little bit of leeway in cutting these, but I think that looks about right. Then I'm going to tighten this down so it holds it in place right where I want it. I'm going to take my wire. I have a saw blade that is a really fine saw blade. I think it's a 4/0 because I'm cutting through pretty thin material. And I'm going to set this in here. This is a cool, mine doesn't have this in my studio, but can you see I can flip this over and hold it? When you do this with a tube, the problem with that is you could collapse the tube if you push down too hard. So just hold it down in place. And then can you see that my drill bit is a lot bigger than this, a lot smaller than the slot that's here. So I need to make a decision, am I going to saw on this edge or the other edge? And the way I measured it, I want to saw it here. So I'm going to kind of push to my left hand and finger, and I'm just going to saw through. And this needs to be as straight as possible, especially when you're making hinges. And I just dropped it on the floor. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut another one because I don't like to look at this floor that wasn't supposed to be textured. If it was a piece of silver or gold, I would. So I found my little piece on the floor. One of the things you're going to find when you're working with really tiny pieces is that you need help. So I'm going to take my rivet, and normally I would anneal this, but I think I can get away with it because it's copper. And what I want to do now is use a pair of flat nose pliers. And I never have my good pliers here at school, and I miss them at moments like this, but I'm always afraid to leave them here and not have them on the line. And now I'm going to line up that one, and I'm going to try to get it to fit down in. I tested it beforehand. It should go in. If it's not going in, I'm gonna flip it over and try it from the other side. That's problematic if you have a pattern on it. Okay, so I know that it's going through this one fine. Can't get it through that one, so what I'm gonna do is take it out, put it through this one, and then put it here. And since I'm not really caring about which surface, although, do you notice that I filed around the edge? When we use the disc cutter a lot of times leaves a burr, and I had to file that off. I don't really want that showing, so I am going to take it off and flip it over. And if you leave the burr on it, you're not going to be able to get a nice flush rivet, kind of like my last demo. Okay, so now I've got my rivet material in there, and what you want to look at is from here is that it's sticking out evenly on both sides. It's not falling out when I turn it up vertical, which is really lovely. When I go to rivet this, I'm going to use a rivet hammer, and I don't use the cross peen on it. Tim McCrate shows how to do that. With bigger rivets I do, but small ones like this I don't. He would take the cross peen and he would make an X on the top of the rivet and then flip it over and do the same thing again. What I can do with this is just use the round head and rivet it. But if I take this and I put it down on the block, can you see that it's going to push that up, and then I'm not going to have a good rivet? So I need this in between, and that's where I made these spacers to fill in while I'm riveting. So I've got these holes. I'm going to wander over here, and I'm going to set it down where that hole is, which is going to allow the rivet to go down in. And then I'm just going to take my hammer. I can push down enough on it. And then I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And I just dinged mine up. And then I'm going to hit it again. And then one of the things you want to know is with one rivet you can usually have movement. I think I want mine rising a little bit higher. And I hit it so hard that I can't. So one of the things that I learned is that if I heat this up, the rivet will get loose and I can move it. There we go, it's moving a little. But nice and tight. Oops, can't do anything about that now. That's why I want all of you guys to practice doing a rivet before you do it on a piece that's really important to you. And what's happened here is that the top of this is flared out. So it's up above this, and on the underside it's doing the same thing. I actually have a little bit more material on the bottom than I do on the top. And that might be because my rivet spacer was a little bit thicker than what my rivet sticking out was that was on there. But that's the initial way of doing it. When you do a rivet with a tube, you do everything up until when you set it. But what I use to set the tube rivet is my center punch, so that I can flare the tube out. And we'll be doing that demo next time. I've drilled a second hole just so that I can show you how to flare a tube rivet. And as you can see, it's about the same width, equal on both sides, right? And if I take the rivet hammer and I hammer on this, because there's no metal on the inside, the tube is going to want to collapse to the inside. So what we have to do first is flare it a little bit. So I'm going to take this center punch that will fit inside here and flare it out a little bit. So I'm going to come over here again. I'm going to set this down. This is also another reason why it's probably, this has gotten bent. So it's probably was sticking up more than it should have been for my last one. But I'm going to set this here. And now I'm going to put my center punch right there. And I'm not going to use this guy because I don't want to damage it. I'm going to use this. And all I needed to do is flare it a little bit. And now I'm going to flip it over on the other side. And flare it a little bit. And I have to say that I like, ooh, I messed that up by hitting that. Oh, again. Okay. I really like tube rivets that are just flared a little bit and not flattened down like a washer. And then the other thing that I forgot to do is I didn't anneal it. So do you see that it's split? So make sure that you anneal your rivets before you flare them. Okay. So I'm going to turn this over and I'm going to flatten it down a little. And then I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing. And you can see that it's off a little bit right up on that top edge, but that's not going anywhere. Okay.